The morning sun cast long shadows across the private aviation terminal as Dr. Maya Thompson pulled up in her Tesla Model X. She checked her watch, 7:45 a.m., perfectly on time for her 8:30 a.m. departure. The air was crisp, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of jet fuel and morning dew. Maya grabbed her designer backpack from the passenger seat, checking one last time that she had everything she needed. Her medical presentation was safely stored on her laptop, and her conference notes were neatly organized in a leather portfolio. She had chosen to dress comfortably for the 3-hour flight, wearing black Lululemon leggings, a cashmere sweater, and limited edition Nike Air Jordans. At 35, Maya had already made a name for herself in the medical world. Her groundbreaking research in pediatric neurosurgery had saved countless young lives, and today she was headed to Boston to deliver the keynote speech at the International Medical Conference. What made her even more proud was that she had donated $2 million to fund the entire event, making it possible for young doctors from developing countries to attend. The valet approached her car with a warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Would you like me to park your car?" "Yes, please," Maya replied, handing him the keys. "I'll be returning in 3 days." She walked towards the terminal entrance, her wheels of her carry-on suitcase clicking softly against the polished concrete. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see several private jets parked on the tarmac, their metal surfaces gleaming in the morning light. One of them, a sleek Gulfstream G650, was chartered specifically for her and the other conference speakers. As she approached the entrance, Maya noticed a security guard watching her intently. He was a middle-aged white man with graying hair and a stern expression, his hand resting casually on his belt near his radio. Maya was used to such looks. They had followed her throughout her career, from medical school to her current position as head of neurosurgery at Chicago's top hospital. She pulled out her phone to check an incoming text from Dr. William Chen, the conference organizer. "Maya, the jet is ready. Can't wait to see your presentation on the new microsurgery technique. The medical community is buzzing about it." A smile crossed her face as she read the message. The technique she had developed had increased the success rate of complex brain surgeries in children by 60%. It had taken 5 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and unwavering determination, but the results made it all worthwhile. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh as Maya entered the terminal. The interior was luxurious, with marble floors, leather seating areas, and a coffee bar serving premium beverages. A few other passengers sat in the waiting area, most absorbed in their phones or laptops. Maya headed towards the security checkpoint, pulling out her ID and boarding documents. Her high heels echoed in the quiet space as she walked, drawing a few glances from other travelers. She had learned long ago to carry herself with confidence, regardless of the stares or assumptions people made about her. The morning sun streamed through the windows, creating patterns on the floor as Maya approached the security desk. She had no idea that in the next few minutes, her ordinary morning would turn into something that would make headlines across the country and spark a national conversation about prejudice in unexpected places. For now, though, she was simply Dr. Maya Thompson, a successful neurosurgeon, looking forward to sharing her medical breakthrough with the world. She reached for her ID, ready to present it to the security guard who was now walking towards her with a look that she had seen too many times before, a look that said she didn't belong here. Security guard James Wheeler had worked at Alight Private Aviation for 15 years, and he prided himself on knowing who belonged and who didn't. The moment he saw Maya Thompson walking through the terminal entrance, his jaw tightened. In his mind, the math wasn't adding up, designer clothes or not. She didn't fit his image of a private jet passenger. "Excuse me, miss," Wheeler called out, stepping directly into Maya's path. His hand rested on his belt, inches from his radio. "The commercial terminal is about 2 miles down the road. This is a private aviation facility." Maya kept her expression neutral, having dealt with similar situations throughout her career. She reached into her bag and pulled out her credentials, along with the private flight documentation. "I'm Dr. Maya Thompson. I'm scheduled for the 8:30 a.m. departure to Boston," she said calmly, extending the papers. "Here's my ID and flight information." Wheeler barely glanced at the documents. There must be some mistake. This terminal is for private jet clients only. His voice carried across the marble floor, causing several nearby passengers to look up from their phones. "Yes, I understand that," Maya replied, her voice steady. I'm the keynote speaker for the International Medical Conference. The jet has been chartered for the conference speakers. Wheeler crossed his arms, his security badge glinting under the terminal's bright lights. Listen, I've been doing this job for a long time. I know our clients. Why don't you double-check your ticket? The commercial terminal handles all regular flights. A small crowd was beginning to gather, some passengers whispering among themselves, while others not so subtly pulled out their phones to record the interaction. Maya could feel her heart racing, but years of performing complex surgeries under pressure had taught her to maintain her composure. Sir, I've shown you my credentials and flight documentation. They're all in order. I'm a neurosurgeon, and I'm scheduled to be on that flight. Maya pointed toward the Gulfstream G650 visible through the window. Wheeler's face reddened. He reached for his radio. I'm going to need backup at the main checkpoint, he spoke into it. We have an unauthorized individual refusing to leave the premises. A woman in a business suit watching nearby gasped audibly. Another passenger shook his head in disgust, his phone camera still recording. I'm not refusing to leave, Maya stated firmly. I'm attempting to board my scheduled flight, for which I have proper documentation. Would you like to speak with the conference organizer or the charter company? Ma'am, if you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to escort you out, Wheeler threatened, his voice growing louder. 2 more security guards appeared, walking briskly toward the scene. Maya took a deep breath, keeping her voice level. I would like to speak with your supervisor. We don't need to involve my supervisor. This is a simple situation. You're in the wrong place. Wheeler took a step closer, his body language increasingly aggressive. Through the growing tension, Maya noticed more phones being raised, more cameras recording. She had experienced discrimination before, but never quite this blatant, never quite this public. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had donated millions to fund this conference, chartered this very jet, and now she was being treated like an intruder. Just then, the terminal doors slid open again. Dr. William Chen rushed in, his face flushed from running. He had received a concerned text from the valet who had parked Maya's car and witnessed the beginning of the confrontation. Wheeler's backup had arrived, 2 more guards flanking him as he reached for Maya's documents. The situation was about to take a dramatic turn, and everyone in the terminal could feel it. The only person who seemed completely calm was Maya herself, standing perfectly still in the middle of the storm she hadn't created, but would soon change everything. Dr. William Chen burst through the small crowd that had gathered, his face flushed from running across the terminal. Maya, what's going on here? He called out, quickly assessing the tense situation before him. Before Maya could respond, Wheeler stepped between them, his hand still hovering near his radio. Sir, please step back. We're handling a security situation here. Dr. Chen's eyes widened in disbelief. Security situation? This is Dr. Maya Thompson. Wheeler's face remained stern. Sir, do you know this woman? Know her? Dr. Chen let out a short, incredulous laugh. She's the reason we're all here. Dr. Thompson is our keynote speaker and the primary benefactor of the entire medical conference. The crowd of onlookers grew larger, their phones recording every moment. Among them were several other conference attendees who had begun to recognize Maya from her medical journal photos and conference materials. Wheeler's face twitched slightly, but he held his ground. I'm going to need to see some additional verification. We have strict protocols here. Maya reached into her bag again, her movements deliberate and calm. She pulled out a folder containing additional documents, her medical license, hospital credentials, and conference organization papers. Here's everything, sir, though I've already shown you my flight documentation. One of the backup security guards, a younger woman named Sarah, stepped forward and actually looked at the documents this time. Her eyes widened as she read. Mr. Wheeler, these credentials are legitimate. And there's a lot more here. Wheeler snatched the papers from Sarah's hands. Let me see those. His eyes scanned the documents, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Dr. Chen had pulled out his phone and was rapidly typing. I'm contacting the aviation company's regional director right now. This is absolutely unacceptable. The terminal's atmosphere had become electric. Other passengers had abandoned any pretense of disinterest and were openly watching the scene unfold. Some were shaking their heads in disgust at Wheeler's behavior, while others were furiously sharing the video clips they'd captured. Dr. Thompson funded this entire conference. Dr. Chen continued, his voice rising with controlled anger. She donated $2 million to make this event possible. The jet out there? She chartered it. Wheeler's face had begun to pale, but he still didn't step aside. Protocol states. Your protocol is based on prejudice, a voice called out from the crowd. It was another conference attendee, a distinguished older doctor who had finally recognized Maya from her groundbreaking publications in neurosurgery. Maya raised her hand slightly, silencing the growing murmurs of the crowd. When she spoke, her voice was clear and controlled. Mr. Wheeler, I understand you're doing your job, but I need you to understand something too. Every minute you delay me here is a minute taken away from the medical conference where I'm supposed to present a new surgical technique that could save children's lives. The weight of her words hung in the air. Several people in the crowd gasped audibly. Wheeler's radio crackled to life, his supervisor's voice cutting through the tension. Wheeler, what's going on down there? I'm getting calls from the aviation company's corporate office. The backup guards exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah, the younger guard who had verified Maya's documents, took a small step back from Wheeler, physically distancing herself from his actions. Dr. Chen's phone buzzed. The regional director was calling back. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple security check, and now everyone in the terminal knew they were witnessing something that would have repercussions far beyond this morning's confrontation. The terminal doors burst open as Thomas Richardson, the regional director of Elite Private Aviation, strode in. His face was set in a grim expression as he surveyed the scene before him, the crowd with their phones out, Wheeler still blocking Maya's path, and Dr. Chen looking increasingly agitated. What in God's name is going on here? Richardson demanded, his voice cutting through the tension. He had just received 3 separate calls about this incident, including one from a board member who had seen the videos already circulating on social media. Wheeler straightened his posture. Sir, I was just following security protocols. By harassing our VIP guest? Richardson interrupted sharply. He turned to Maya, his expression softening. Dr. Thompson, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for this situation. The crowd watched as Wheeler's face drained of color. VIP guest? He stammered. Yes, Wheeler, Richardson said coldly. Dr. Maya Thompson is not only the keynote speaker at the International Medical Conference, but she's also the primary donor who made the entire event possible. She personally chartered the Gulfstream G650 for all conference speakers. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Maya remained composed, though she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. But that's not all, Dr. Chen added, his voice carrying across the terminal. Dr. Thompson developed a revolutionary microsurgery technique that has saved hundreds of children's lives. She's one of the most respected pediatric neurosurgeons in the world. Richardson turned back to Wheeler. The conference organizers specifically requested our best security protocols for Dr. Thompson's flight. Instead, you've managed to create a PR nightmare for our company. Sarah, the young security guard, stepped forward. Sir, I tried to tell Mr. Wheeler that Dr. Thompson's credentials were legitimate, but he wouldn't listen. Wheeler's face had turned an alarming shade of red. I was just trying to maintain security standards. No, Maya interrupted, her voice firm but calm. You made assumptions based on how I look. You didn't even properly check my credentials when I first presented them. The videos of the incident had already reached the local news stations. Richardson's phone buzzed continuously with notifications. The hashtag Let Thompson Fly was trending on social media, with thousands of shares in just the past few minutes. Dr. Thompson, Richardson said, your jet is ready for boarding. Please, allow me to escort you personally. He gestured toward the terminal's private boarding area. But Maya didn't move. Instead, she turned to face Wheeler directly. Mr. Wheeler, I want you to understand something. Today, you didn't just try to stop me from boarding a plane. You tried to stop me from sharing medical knowledge that could save children's lives. Your prejudice could have had consequences far beyond this terminal. The crowd had fallen completely silent, hanging on her every word. Even Wheeler seemed to shrink under the weight of her statement. I've faced discrimination before, Maya continued, her voice steady. In medical school, in hospitals, and now here. But each time, I've chosen to turn it into an opportunity for education and change. Dr. Chen checked his watch anxiously. Maya, we should really get going. The conference attendees are waiting. Richardson stepped forward. Wheeler, report to my office immediately after your shift. We'll discuss this incident in detail. His tone left no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. As Maya finally moved toward the boarding area, followed by Dr. Chen and Richardson, the crowd parted respectfully. Several people nodded at her in admiration. The young security guard, Sarah, mouthed, "I'm sorry," as she passed. Wheeler stood rooted to his spot, watching as the woman he had tried to throw out was escorted to her private jet like the VIP she truly was. The gravity of his actions and their potential consequences was finally beginning to sink in. The videos spread like wildfire across social media platforms. By the time Maya's private jet reached cruising altitude, the incident at Alight Private Aviation had become national news. Major networks were running the footage captured by passengers, showing Wheeler's confrontation with the distinguished neurosurgeon. Back at the terminal, Wheeler sat in Richardson's office, watching the media coverage unfold on the wall-mounted television. His hands trembled as he read the comments flooding social media. The hashtag #LederThompsonFly had evolved into hashtag #JusticeForderThompson, with millions of shares and counting. "Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" Richardson asked, pacing behind his desk. "Dr. Thompson isn't just any passenger. She's a pioneer in pediatric neurosurgery. Last year alone, her surgical technique saved over 200 children." Wheeler stared at his hands. "I was just following." "No," Richardson cut him off sharply. "You weren't following protocol. We've reviewed the security footage. You didn't even properly check her credentials when she first presented them." Sarah, the young security guard, knocked and entered the office with a stack of papers. "Sir, I have the incident reports you requested, and," she hesitated, glancing at Wheeler. "Corporate HR is on line 1. The phone on Richardson's desk blinked insistently. Outside the office, the terminal was buzzing with activity as journalists gathered, hoping to get comments from employees or witnesses. Wheeler's phone vibrated. Another message from his daughter, a medical student. "Dad, how could you? Dr. Thompson is one of my role models. Her research papers are required reading in our neurosurgery rotation." Richardson picked up the phone. "Yes, sir. Yes, I understand the severity. No, sir, this is not what our company stands for." His face grew increasingly grave as he listened. Local civil rights organizations had already released statements condemning the incident. The hospital where Maya worked issued a powerful statement supporting her and highlighting her contributions to medical science. Sarah handed Wheeler a tissue as tears formed in his eyes. "I never meant—" he started, but couldn't finish. "Intent doesn't matter here," Richardson said, hanging up the phone. "Your actions spoke loudly enough. Dr. Thompson was carrying credentials that would grant her access to any operating room in the country, yet you couldn't grant her access to a plane she chartered." The television continued to play footage from different angles. Each new video clip showed Wheeler's increasing aggression contrasted with Maya's remarkable composure. Commentary from medical professionals and aviation experts filled the screens, all condemning the incident. "Corporate wants an emergency meeting," Richardson announced. "They're implementing immediate changes to our security protocols. And as for you, Wheeler." Wheeler looked up, expecting the worst. Dr. Thompson's response to this incident was graceful beyond measure. During her flight, she released a statement. Instead of calling for your termination, she's advocating for comprehensive bias training across all private aviation facilities. Sarah's eyes widened. She did that, even after how she was treated? Richardson nodded, pulling up Maya's statement on his computer. She wrote, "This incident reflects a broader issue in our society. Rather than pursuing punitive measures, I believe we should focus on education and systemic change. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance." Wheeler's tears flowed freely now. The weight of his actions and the magnitude of Maya's response overwhelmed him. Outside, more news vans pulled up to the terminal, their satellite dishes extending skyward. "You have a choice to make," Richardson said firmly. "You can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. Dr. Thompson has opened a door for change. It's up to you to walk through it. Maya's keynote speech at the International Medical Conference received a standing ovation, but not just for her groundbreaking surgical technique. The incident at the private terminal had transformed her presentation into something more powerful, a moment of healing and change. Medical science teaches us that healing requires both treatment and prevention, Maya said, addressing the packed auditorium. The same principle applies to social issues. We can't just treat the symptoms of bias, we must prevent it through education and understanding. News cameras lined the back of the hall, capturing every word. What had started as a medical conference had evolved into a national conversation about prejudice in unexpected places. Maya's story had resonated with people across all professions and backgrounds. During the Q&A session, a young medical student stood up. Dr. Thompson, how do you maintain such grace under pressure? The videos from the terminal show remarkable composure. Maya adjusted her microphone. In neurosurgery, we often face high-pressure situations where staying calm is crucial. But more importantly, I've learned that anger, though justified, rarely leads to lasting change. Sometimes, the most powerful response is to transform a negative experience into an opportunity for education. Her words struck a chord. In the audience, hospital administrators began discussing their own institutional policies. Conference organizers were already planning workshops on bias in healthcare settings. Back in Chicago, Elite Private Aviation had received Maya's proposal for comprehensive bias training. Instead of calling for Wheeler's dismissal, she had outlined a detailed program that would address unconscious bias across the entire private aviation industry. The goal isn't to punish, Maya explained to reporters after her speech. The goal is to prevent another person from experiencing what I experienced. Whether you're entering a hospital, a private terminal, or any other space, your credentials should matter more than your appearance. Major airlines and private aviation companies began reaching out to Maya's team. They wanted to implement similar training programs. The incident had exposed a blind spot in the luxury travel industry, and companies were eager to address it. Dr. Chen watched from the side of the stage, amazed at how Maya had turned a humiliating experience into a movement for change. You're not just saving lives in the operating room anymore, he told her during a break. You're changing them in boardrooms and terminals too. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, the young security guard who had tried to help her. Your response to this situation inspired me to start a diversity initiative among junior security staff. Would you consider being our advisor? As Maya prepared for her next presentation, social media continued to explode with support. #DignityForAll had replaced the earlier hashtags, with people sharing their own experiences of prejudice in professional spaces. We have a choice, Maya told a group of medical students who gathered around her after the session. We can let discrimination defeat us, or we can use it as a catalyst for change. Every obstacle can become an opportunity if we approach it with the right mindset. The conference organizers announced a new annual session on bias in professional environments, named in Maya's honor. Hospitals began reviewing their security protocols, ensuring that medical staff of all backgrounds were treated with equal respect. Wheeler's daughter, the medical student, wrote an open letter that went viral. My father's actions were wrong, but Dr. Thompson's response shows us the path to real change. She chose education over punishment, understanding over anger. As the day drew to a close, Maya received news that her story would be featured in a major medical journal, not for her surgical technique, but for her approach to handling discrimination in professional spaces. The article would be required reading for hospital administrators nationwide. Sometimes, Maya reflected, looking out at the setting sun through the conference center windows, the most important surgeries we perform aren't on the brain or body, but on the mindsets that hold our society back. 3 months after the incident, James Wheeler stood nervously in front of a classroom filled with aviation security personnel. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone, but his voice was steady when he began to speak. My name is James Wheeler, and I made a terrible mistake, he started. I let my biases cloud my judgment and nearly prevented a brilliant neurosurgeon from saving children's lives. Today, I want to share what I've learned. The room was silent. Everyone knew his story. The videos of his confrontation with Dr. Maya Thompson had become required viewing in security training sessions across the country. But this was different. This was Wheeler choosing to become part of the solution. Elite Private Aviation had implemented Maya's comprehensive bias training program, making it mandatory for all employees. Wheeler had not only completed the program but had volunteered to share his experience with others. His daughter, the medical student, sat in the back of the room, watching her father with a mixture of pride and lingering disappointment. I thought I knew what a private jet passenger looked like, Wheeler continued. 20 years of security work had given me certain expectations. But Dr. Thompson taught me that assumptions can be dangerous. They can hurt people, careers, and in this case, could have delayed medical advances that saved children's lives. Sarah, who had been promoted to head of security training, nodded encouragingly from the side of the room. The program she developed with Maya's guidance had already been adopted by 3 major airlines and dozens of private aviation facilities. Wheeler clicked to the next slide, showing Maya's surgical innovation statistics. While I was busy questioning her presence, Dr. Thompson was carrying groundbreaking medical research that has saved over 200 children. My prejudice could have delayed that knowledge reaching other surgeons. In the months since the incident, Wheeler had undergone a profound transformation. He'd spent countless hours reading about unconscious bias, attended diversity workshops, and even started mentoring new security officers about the importance of fair treatment. The hardest part wasn't facing my supervisors or the media, Wheeler admitted to the class. It was facing my own daughter, who told me that Dr. Thompson was her role model in medical school. I had to confront the fact that I might have treated my own daughter the same way if I didn't know her. The training session included role-playing scenarios, security protocol reviews, and discussions about real-world situations. Wheeler shared how he now approached his job differently, focusing on documentation rather than assumptions, respect rather than suspicion. Dr. Thompson could have demanded my firing, Wheeler said, his voice thick with emotion. Instead, she chose to create change. She taught me that transformation is possible if we're willing to learn from our mistakes. During breaks, security officers from other facilities shared similar stories, discussing times they had made assumptions based on appearance. The conversation was honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but always focused on improvement. Maya's influence extended beyond the training program. Elite Private Aviation had revised its hiring practices, resulting in a more diverse security team. The company had established a scholarship program for minority students interested in aviation security careers. Wheeler's phone buzzed, a message from Maya's office. She had accepted his request to meet and share his progress. His hand shook as he read the message, remembering their last encounter. "The most important thing I've learned," Wheeler told the class as the session concluded, "is that security isn't about keeping people out. It's about ensuring safe passage for everyone who belongs, and everyone with proper credentials belongs, regardless of how they look." His daughter approached him after the session, tears in her eyes. "Dad," she said, hugging him, "this is what real change looks like." 6 months after the incident, Dr. Maya Thompson's private jet touched down at a light private aviation terminal once again. This time, the atmosphere was dramatically different. As she approached the entrance, she saw a diverse team of security officers, including Sarah, who had been promoted to Chief of Security Operations. "Welcome back, Dr. Thompson." Sarah greeted her warmly, checking her credentials with professional courtesy. The terminal had undergone more than just personnel changes. New signs highlighted the facility's commitment to inclusive security practices, and a wall displayed photographs of various VIP clients from all backgrounds. James Wheeler stood slightly behind Sarah, his posture reflecting both nervousness and determination. This meeting had been arranged weeks in advance, his first face-to-face interaction with Maya since the incident that had changed both their lives. "Dr. Thompson," Wheeler said, his voice steady but humble, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Maya nodded, noticing the changes in the man who had once tried to bar her from her own chartered jet. He wore a new badge that identified him as a diversity training coordinator, alongside his security credentials. "Mr. Wheeler, I've heard good things about your work with the training program," Maya replied, gesturing toward a quiet seating area, the same spot where, 6 months ago, passengers had recorded their confrontation was now a space for positive change. They sat down, joined by Sarah and Dr. William Chen, who had flown in specifically for this meeting. The terminal staff carried on with their duties, but everyone was aware of the historic nature of this conversation. Your story has become a case study in medical schools now, Dr. Chen shared. Not just for handling discrimination, but for turning conflict into opportunity. Wheeler pulled out a folder containing statistics from the new training program. We trained over 5,000 aviation security personnel across the country, he explained. The incidence of bias-related complaints have dropped by 78% in participating facilities. Maya reviewed the numbers, noting the comprehensive nature of the changes. The program she had proposed had evolved into an industry-wide movement. Private aviation companies nationwide had adopted what they now called the Thompson Protocol, a set of guidelines ensuring fair and professional treatment of all passengers. My daughter graduates medical school next month, Wheeler said, his eyes growing moist. She's specializing in neurosurgery, inspired by your work. Both your medical work and how you handled what I did. Sarah shared updates about the terminal's new mentorship program, which paired experienced security officers with new hires from diverse backgrounds. The wall behind them displayed the program's motto: dignity, respect, security, for all. The change wasn't easy, Wheeler admitted. Many of us had to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, but seeing the impact, how many lives we've touched, how many barriers we've helped break down, it's been worth every challenging moment. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a newspaper article. It featured a photograph of a young black female pilot being welcomed at a private aviation terminal, with the headline, "Aviation Industry Leads the Way in Diversity Reform." This is why I chose education over punishment, Maya explained. Real change doesn't come from removing one person. It comes from transforming the system, from turning opponents into allies. As their meeting concluded, Wheeler's daughter arrived, having just finished her hospital rotation. She hugged her father, then turned to Maya with admiration in her eyes. Dr. Thompson, your surgical techniques are revolutionary, but what you've taught us about handling prejudice, that's saving lives in a different way. The terminal buzzed with activity as Maya prepared to board her flight. This time, every staff member knew her name, not because of the viral videos, but because of the lasting changes she had inspired. Safe travels, Dr. Thompson, Wheeler said as she walked toward her gate. And thank you for showing us a better way. Maya paused, looking back at the transformed terminal, at Sarah's proud stance as chief of security, at Wheeler's new role as an advocate for change, at the diverse faces of the security team. Thank you, she replied, for proving that change is possible when we choose to learn and grow together.